Every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And then there were four. Yes, the Tory leadership race is hotting up just as the weather is outside, and there are only 4 candidates remaining. And by 3 p.m. today, there'll be only 3 candidates remaining. We'll explore this race in gory detail coming up after the headlines.
Good morning, it's 9:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The UK has provisionally recorded its hottest night on record, with data from the Met Office showing overnight temperatures didn't fall below 25 degrees in some places. Red extreme heat warnings continue today for millions of people in England, with amber warnings for large parts of Wales and Scotland. Temperatures are forecast to hit at least 40 degrees later today. That would again break records. Conservative MPs are preparing for the penultimate round of voting to choose the next leader of the party. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, received the largest backing from MPs, while the International Trade Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, followed closely behind. While the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, is also in the running, so too is Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who yesterday secured the lowest share of the votes. But speaking this morning, she still believes she could win.
I do feel confident. There's everything to play for. My colleagues are looking at who's going to be winning the next election, and I think I'm that candidate, so let's see what happens. Well, I think I'm getting support from all wings of the party. I'm the unity candidate as well as the change candidate.
Ukrainian forces have pushed back a Russian advance in the east of the country as fighting continues. In its latest intelligence report, the UK's Ministry of Defence said Moscow is struggling to keep up its advance as it's been plagued by a lack of manpower and strong Ukrainian resistance. In an overnight address, President Zelensky praised the success of his military and said they would regain control. Wages here are falling at the fastest rate since records began when you take into account rising prices. The latest data from the ONS showed paychecks dropped by 3.7% over the 3 months to May when compared against inflation. Meanwhile, the number of UK workers on payrolls has risen by 31,000 to 29.6 million between May and June. We're on your TV, we're online and on your DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now let's head back to the briefing with Tom.
The battle for number 10. Well, good morning. It's 9:33 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. By 3 p.m. today, the leadership race will be reduced down to just 3 candidates. MPs' votes from midday to 2 p.m, followed by a tense hour of vote counting. Now, yesterday, Rishi Sunak again topped the poll with 115 votes, 5 short of guaranteeing a spot in the final 2 just yet. Next was Penny Mordaunt, who slipped back by a vote, down to 82 backers. Liz Truss came up third, up 7 votes to up to 71 there. And Kemi Badenoch came in with 58, up by 9 on Thursday's ballot. And in what few thought as a particular surprise, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, was eliminated after receiving just 31 votes, down 1 on his last performance. Let's listen to what he had to say after the results.
Well, thank you very much. That is the end of the road for me for this race. But look, it has been an amazing run. I'm incredibly proud of the team. I'm incredibly grateful to all the supporters who've been with me at some, if not all, stages of the race. We fought for a clean start because we know that that's what the country is crying out for. We've seen that in the response to the 2 debates. We've seen that in the engagement we've had from people. So now I'm going to be with you, of course, over the next 2 years, fighting in the council elections, then fighting again in the general election, and then long into the future, because we need to make sure that our party, the Conservative Party, is able to deliver a clean start for the country and for ourselves. So please, I'm not going to be talking about any candidates at the moment. I'll listen to what they have to say, and I'll be making my judgment later. But thank you. Thank you for being with me.
So no endorsement from Tom Tugendhat quite yet. We'll keep our ear pressed to the ground to see whether he does endorse before MPs vote from midday today. But what does all of this mean? Well, Tugendhat is seen to be more on the left of the party, so it will be a struggle for the tax cutters, Kemi Badenoch and Liz Truss, to pick up many of his votes. Today might be more about the world's most duplicitous electorate, Tory MPs that is, swapping from one candidate to another, playing games to knock people out rather than backing the people they believe in. This race is still incredibly unpredictable. So let's go through these candidates one by one. Let's start with Kemi Badenoch, the MP for Saffron Walden. She may be one of the lesser-known candidates, but she's gained significant momentum. She's described herself as a first-generation immigrant. She worked at McDonald's during her A-levels and before Parliament worked as a software engineer, a systems analyst at RBS and as a wealth manager. She's been dubbed by some as the anti-woke candidate, voted Leave in 2016 and was the Minister for Equalities and Minister for Local Government, Faith and Communities until her resignation on the 6th of July. In last night's round, of course, she picked up 9 supporters to a total of 58 votes, leaving her in 4th place. So let's now talk to a backer of Kemi Badenoch, the Member of Parliament for St Austell and Newquay, Steve Double. Steve, welcome to the programme. I suppose, first of all, Kemi is in 4th place. It's going to be a bit of a struggle for her today to leapfrog Liz Truss in 3rd place. What's the game plan?
Good morning, Tom. Well, I think we're really pleased with the result last night and the increase in Kemi's vote. And there's some momentum behind Kemi's campaign. And we're confident that we can persuade enough of my colleagues to back her in this next round. She is clearly well liked by the party in the country, by the grassroots party. They want to see her into the final 2. And I hope my colleagues will listen to that and back her to get her through the next stage today.
It's going to be a pretty tough fight, of course. Listening to the words of the other people in this race, Kemi is the only candidate left in this race who has never sat in Cabinet. Kemi is the person in this race who entered Parliament the last out of all of those people in this race still as well. The other people in this race are going to be running on experience. What is her response to that?
Well, I think she's had broad experience as a minister in various departments across government. But the point is she's incredibly capable. She's demonstrated that, I think, over the last 10 days, that she has the vision, she has the drive, she has the ability to communicate. And I think our party right now needs a fresh approach. We need someone who can come in with a fresh agenda, a fresh approach, be the new face of our party going into the next general election. And I believe the person best placed for that is Kemi.
Well, let's turn now to policy, because there have been some policy wobbles. Yesterday, Kemi Badenoch said apparently to the hustings of the Conservative Environment Network that she agreed with the net zero target, the net zero ambitions, and then later in the media was saying, well, actually, that number, 2050, could shift. What does she actually believe on this issue?
Well, I think Kemi's been clear that absolutely we need to aim for net zero. We need to reduce our global contribution to climate change. But it's very important we take other countries with us. And we need to do it in a way that is pragmatic, that is deliverable, that doesn't damage our economy in the process. So I think it's absolutely right. Although we're committed to that outcome, we continue to review how we're going to achieve it to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is not going to damage our economy, but also importantly take other countries with us. If we wreck our economy in the process of us reaching net zero, no other country in the world will then follow us, because they'll look at us and think, why on earth would we do that? So I think doing it in a measured and sustainable way is the right approach, and we need to keep that target date under review whilst maintaining our absolute commitment to be a world leader.
Kemi Badenoch has also served as a minister in the Treasury. And I want to understand whether she is someone who believes that tax cuts need to come before growth, or growth needs to come before tax cuts. That seems to be a dividing line in this election, with the former Chancellor, I should say, Rishi Sunak, saying that we can't possibly cut taxes until the economy grows. Does Kemi agree?
Well, I think what we need is get back to good old conservative, responsible fiscal policy, which is, yes, we want to be a low tax government. We want to cut tax. We recognise the incredible shock that our economy has gone through over the last 2.5 years or so, and we do need to take that into account. Yes, we want to cut taxes, but we have to do it at a time when it's right. We understand the huge challenges that people are facing right now with the cost of living, so we need to look at where we can help where we can, but then cut taxes in a way that is responsible. And I think that is Kemi's approach. She's made that very clear, that we want to cut taxes when the time is right and provide focused help to the people who need it most in the coming months.
That does seem to be a less effusively tax-cutting position than that of the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, who says that there need to be immediate tax cuts. Might that be something that holds Kemi back today?
Well, I think what Kemi has been clear is she's not going to make promises she can't keep. She's not going to overpromise and under-deliver. I think people want their Prime Minister to be straight and honest with them about the challenge we face, but also be clear about we will help where and when we can. And I think that is Kemi's position. She will want to cut taxes when the time is right, but what she's not going to do is make promises about what she's going to do on day one and then not be able to deliver those.
Steve Double, thank you so much for coming here, putting that case forward. I know you're voting in just a couple of hours' time, so I'll let you get back to Parliament and make that case to your colleagues too. Thanks for joining us. Well, now, something that was mentioned in the Commons yesterday as Boris Johnson delivered the opening statement to that confidence motion, a motion that the government won, was, of course, that there might have been worry in the streets of Kiev. The Prime Minister said he acknowledged he was more popular in Kiev than in Kensington. Well, a senior Ukrainian government official has told GB News that he's confident that Ukraine will continue to receive full support from the UK, whoever replaces Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. The Deputy Defence Minister, Vladimir Havelov, says that he's very touched by high levels of support from all political parties and, importantly, perhaps most importantly, the British people. Major General Havelov told our Home and Security editor, Mark White, that Ukraine needs the West to send more advanced weapons to help halt Russian advances.
In Ukraine's second city, this is what months of Russian bombardment does. In Kharkiv's largest residential neighbourhood, there's not a building that hasn't been damaged. Although the main battles are now being waged many miles from here in the Donbass and in the south, this war of attrition is being felt far and wide. But thanks to Western-supplied advanced weapon systems, Ukraine's Deputy Defence Minister told me his country's armed forces have largely halted Russian advances. And with more high-tech weaponry, they will, he believes, be able to retake lost territory.
Given the creativity of our commanders, together with technologies we receive from the West, I have no doubts we will crush this old-fashioned Russian army with the old Soviet-type style of offensive. And they have no chances in terms of technologies.
The minister told me his country would be forever grateful for the leadership shown by outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Whoever replaces him, the Ukrainians are confident they'll still have unwavering support from the UK's political leadership and, importantly, from the British people.
We feel that energy every day from ordinary people, from political parties and different organizations in society. So I'm very impressed with the reaction of United Kingdom, Great Britain.
At this training camp in northwest England, the first of at least 10,000 Ukrainian recruits are being put through their paces. The UK's former head of Special Forces says the programme is vital in helping replace Ukrainian combat losses. But those losses are, he says, being felt just as keenly by the Russians.
And to sustain those numbers, eventually they will need to mobilise, or perhaps they'll come up with a form of words as they have done for the war. They will need more men. They're fighting along a 500-mile plus front. That's the distance from here north of Edinburgh. It consumes manpower.
The Deputy Defence Minister says the Ukrainian people are in this fight for the long haul and there will be no surrender of Ukrainian territory to Moscow.
Civil society will never accept any kind of deal related to the loss of our territories. There will be no deal with Russia.
The Ukrainian people will be hoping whoever replaces Boris Johnson that they'll be just as unequivocal in their support for the fight against Russian aggression. Mark White, GB News.
Well, thanks, Mark, for that analysis there. Well, back to those candidates now. The third placed last night was Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. Soon after being elected to the Commons, Truss began climbing up that ministerial ladder. She's held a whole host of cabinet positions under Cameron, May and Boris Johnson. She's the longest-serving cabinet minister in this government. As Trade Secretary, she famously secured over 50 post-Brexit trade deals, and in September last year, she became the second female Foreign Secretary in history, a role that has navigated the UK's response to war in Europe. But the pressure's on, after Kemi Badenoch scooped up more new votes than her in last night's round. Let's talk now to a prominent backer of the Foreign Secretary. Alex Shelbrooke is the Conservative MP for Elmet and Rothwell. Welcome to the programme, Alec. I suppose the first issue here is that Truss is, of course, in third place, ahead of Kemi Badenoch, but Kemi picked up more votes than Liz did last night. Does that mean that Kemi has more momentum?
No, I don't think so. I think things are going the way that we thought they would. Obviously, you sit there, you analyse the numbers. We always knew it would be a slow burn with Liz because of the way that the votes across the right had fragmented. But we've stayed ahead of Kemi. We know we're getting a considerable bit of support coming from Tom. And of course, I think this is one of the important things about Liz's campaign, is that she's appealing right across the party. So if you take, she's had a lot of support from ERG members, prominent people there, but she's also got the support of people like myself and Wendy Morton. We're very much from the One Nation wing of the party. She's able to steer that ship up the middle of the party, bringing in support from both sides, and I think that's why we're going to see, a fairly good chunk of Tom Tugendhat's support come across to us, because we're looking at somebody who can actually unite all those sides.
Really interesting piece of analysis there, because it's not one that is reflected in a lot of the analysis around this race. The idea in many people's mind is that Tom's support will be split between Penny and Rishi. What is it that makes you say that Tom's support might well actually go to the Foreign Secretary as well?
People I've spoken to be blunt. I've been speaking to people this morning who are on Tom's team. I was speaking to some last night. These assumptions that people are making about where they perceive a candidate to be on the left, the right, the centre of the party are not actually true. In fact, if you look at the declared supporters of each candidate, it's noticeable that they've all had a spread from across all wings of the party. So when we're looking at who's got real momentum and who I think with Liz has laid down real policies. I think, when we're talking about some of the other candidates, there's been a criticism that they haven't actually had as many solid policies as Liz has put out there. Now, she will come into criticism and has been analysed for some of those policies, but at least it's solid ground to argue on.
Couldn't help but notice that Liz Truss's campaign put out a press statement this morning reconfirming her commitment to raise defence spending to 3% of GDP by 2030. Might some describe that as a bit of a cynical ploy to win over the defence-minded backers of the former soldier Tom Tugendhat?
Well, I don't think that's how it goes. I mean, I'm actually leader of the British delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and on that I'm actually chairman of the Defence and Security Committee, and I've been briefing Liz as Foreign Secretary for several months now about some of the issues we've been challenging, because of course Liz has been out on the world stage representing Britain, who have been at the forefront of the response to Ukraine. So I've very much been having the conversation that we've been talking about in the Assembly, that this change in the world stature is going to require more investment, and we think it's going to be about 3%. Now, we know that there's going to have to be a whole range of investment into the military, so it's an easier point to make that 3% is the target we're going to have to get to. People understand that, they know where it's coming from. So I think this has been developed over a long period of time, but people like myself, who have been on Liz's campaign from the start and been briefing her for a long time in her current role, as to where she's come to that conclusion.
Now, just finally in this conversation, of course, Liz did pull out of the expected debate tonight. There was a bit of blue on blue in the debate on Sunday evening, where Liz Truss accused the Chancellor of taxing too highly, and indeed, or the former Chancellor, I should say, Rishi Sunak, of taxing too highly and indeed pushing the United Kingdom into recession. Is that a fair charge?
Well, I think we do need to reassess the budget that was put forward in November by the then Chancellor, because the world has changed so fundamentally. And what I think the real positive is about what's happened is that you're getting the whole sort of different ranges of opinion out there on the table. Normally these are opinions that are held privately in Cabinet and the decisions come to. But you're getting them out there and people are seeing those. And I know from all the conversations I've had that whoever wins this contest, the party will swing in behind. And you would hope that no matter who it is, and I obviously hope, and I do think it will be Liz, that you can take on board all the points that are being made. So they do look tough, they do look like that fighting on each other, which indeed in many ways they are. But ultimately you're going to come out of this with a very strong position and a strong candidate who will be a good Prime Minister.
Well, it will be fascinating to see how well and how many of those Tom Tugendhat votes do actually go across to Liz. We don't have long to wait, but for now, Alex Shelbrooke, thank you so much for joining us here on The Briefing. Really interesting stuff there. Thanks for your time. Well, now, finally, let's move on to the front-runner, the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. He is secure in first place with 115 votes, although not quite yet guaranteeing a spot in that final two. Let's turn now to a senior backer of Rishi Sunak, the chair of the Education Select Committee and MP for Harlow, Robert Halfon. Thanks for making time for us, Rob. I suppose, first of all, why has Rishi Sunak not yet got to that magic number 120? By this time in the race, by the third ballot, whether it was Boris Johnson, whether it was Theresa May, whether it was David Cameron, they'd all secured a spot in the final two.
Well, first thing I should say is I'm supporting Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor, because he is very good in a crisis. We saw that during the pandemic when he developed the furlough scheme, which saved thousands of my constituents from destitution and helped hundreds of businesses and millions of businesses across the country. The second thing is that he's being responsible about the economy, noting that we have to get inflation down and deal with the national debt. And thirdly, that when it counts, he's cut the cost of living, including the national insurance tax cut, in essence, for 70% of households. I think that the former Chancellor is doing very well. He increased his votes substantially from just over 100 to 115. There's a fair few contestants in this race. It's never over till it's over, and he's working hard to get every vote in this round today.
Now, initially, Robert Halfon, you supported Sajid Javid, someone who came forward with a pretty comprehensive plan for tax that included scrapping that national insurance rise, scrapping the corporation tax rise. Do you sit particularly comfortably with moving from that sort of tax-cutting candidate towards a candidate in Rishi Sunak who's promising to keep the national insurance hike and raise corporation tax by 6 points next year?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that I've known Sajid Javid for 34 years, and I thought that he would make a good Prime Minister, and I was proud to support him. I did always believe that we had to deal with the national debt. I'm very much with Mrs Thatcher on this, who said we had to be the party of good housekeeping. The facts are that we have £80 billion to pay off in debt interest alone over the coming year. The overall debt is £2 trillion. If we don't pay off that debt, we won't have enough money for tax cuts. We won't have enough money to spend on vital public services. And if there's another crisis, God forbid, a further pandemic or whatever it may be, we won't have the money to support people in the way that we were during coronavirus.
And yet, just a couple of days ago, the CEBR, a very respected body, came forward and said that because of the amount of inflation in the United Kingdom economy right now, receipts to the Exchequer are going to be far higher than were expected, about £60 billion more headroom than was expected. Is that not room with which tax cuts could be made?
Well, the Chancellor said that he will look to further cut the cost of living for families over the coming months. But the important thing is we still have to deal with the national debt, even if that headroom is right, as you describe. As I mentioned, we have 80 billion of debt interest alone. Just imagine if we had that money for tax cuts and for cutting the cost of living. I've always believed in good housekeeping. And the other important thing to note is the Chancellor just spent when he was Chancellor only a few weeks ago, £37 billion on a package to cut the cost of living, not just with national insurance tax cuts, but with a 400 rebate to people across the country in terms of the energy bills. 8 million of the most vulnerable families will get up to £1,200. So he has done everything possible to cut the cost of living. He's cut taxes for people who need those tax cuts, particularly those who are lower earners. So I think the Chancellor is being actually very responsible. He's not making promises that he can't keep, because we have to deal with inflation. Everyone knows if you go, I remember when a fine loaf of bread in Asda was 50p, a good quality loaf of bread, and now it's well over a pound. If we don't deal with inflation, we won't cut the cost of living for ordinary families. And everybody knows if they want to buy a cup of coffee, a jar of coffee, loaf of bread, or whatever it may be, or if they go to the petrol stations, prices are ever increasing because inflation is ever increasing. So that is the number one enemy for most people across the country. And that's, again, what Mrs Thatcher always taught us.
Well, Robert Halfon, thank you for making that impassioned case there for us today. Of course, it's not long until we will find out the results of today's ballot. Will Rishi Sunak make it over 120? Quite possibly. Well, Robert Halfon, thank you for joining us. Coming up, I'll be joining Mercy Muroki on To The Point. That's it for the briefing today. But before To The Point, let's have a look at just how hot it is around the United Kingdom. Here's the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. 40 Celsius in some parts of the UK today, mid to high 30s for many, and that's why there's a red warning for extreme heat. These are unprecedented, record-breaking temperatures that could and very likely will cause impacts to health and to infrastructure. The heat has been moving our way across the whole of the UK during the last 24 hours, and it intensifies across southeast Scotland, northeast England, into central and eastern parts of England during the rest of the day. With clear skies, although with a bit of a breeze, those temperatures will be rising all day. Mid-30s by mid-morning, and then by the afternoon, mid to high 30s. 34 Celsius in southeast Scotland, Scotland's hottest day on record, and 40 Celsius for central and eastern England. Truly extraordinary temperatures could cause impacts for many. It will be cooler for southwest England as well as for parts of Wales and Northern Ireland. And that cool air is separated from the heat with an area of showers which will move east during Tuesday night into the start of Wednesday. And those showers, heavy at times, will pop up just about anywhere overnight. And although it's still a warm night, nowhere near as warm as it was last night. 18 or 19 Celsius in the south, 14, 15 for Scotland and Northern Ireland. A bright start for many on Wednesday. Still a few showers around, first thing across Wales and the southwest, central and eastern Scotland as well. And then by the afternoon, the focus for showers moves into the Midlands, northern England, eastern Scotland, and eventually East Anglia and the southeast. Could be a few rumbles of thunder as well. And still a hot day, nowhere near as hot, but still a hot day in the east. 30 Celsius. But I think further west, Scotland, Northern Ireland, high teens, and for much of England and Wales in the west, we're looking at low 20s. Back to more typical summer weather for the UK Thursday, Friday, sunny spells and showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.